So this is a Seattle Bhakti-Yoga session. My group is called Seattle Bhakti-Yoga that I started in Seattle on the order of a spiritual master. And so that is why I do this. I don't do this because I presume to teach. I don't do this because I presume to know everything. I don't do this because I am a guru. No one has a right to call themselves that. I only do this because my elder told me to do so. And the sessions are all podcasted, so you can actually go and listen back on all of the other podcasts that are on SoundCloud. We also have videos up on our channel on YouTube, so you can go back and review those at your leisure. We've got live stream going on Women of Color Speak Out, and then there will also be video posted on Women of Color Speak Out on YouTube of this session. So, Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama. Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama. Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. It is important to acknowledge that we are on stolen native land. Land that was safeguarded for thousands of years by the original Miccosukee Seminole nation. If we don't acknowledge that, we cannot call ourselves honest people. And if we cannot call ourselves honest people, we cannot practice yoga. How many people here have been practicing what you call yoga? But you can raise your hand. Have some of you been practicing it for years? You can raise your hand. So quite a few people here. Does anyone here know how to correctly pronounce the word yoga? No? And yet some of you have been practicing it for years. What does that suggest to you? It suggests to me that whoever's been teaching you didn't do their job. That's what that suggests to me. Because it's true. That's why this is called decolonizing yoga. Because throughout this land, and particularly in the Western world, white people have decided that they have a right to take what belongs to other people and teach it and make money off of it when they don't actually know what they're doing. That's a problem. Because it means that they're not going to be teaching people the correct path. They're not going to be teaching people the correct philosophy. That's going to cause a lot of problems. Not just now, but in the future. And for particularly the land where this comes from, it causes a lot of problems for them. But in the Western world, people don't see that. So it doesn't occur to them to think about what they're doing. That's why decolonizing yoga is so important. Because it's not just a philosophical issue, it's a racial justice issue. Racial justice. Because if white people or people with Western white privilege steal from people of color, it means that there is a deep injustice happening on many different levels. So, with that said, I want to give you all a trigger warning. We're going to go into some deep topics. We're going to talk about some deep topics. They might upset you, particularly if you've been practicing yoga for years, right? Because you've been taught something from a certain perspective that was incredibly privileged, right? And bastardized. And if that's the case, then it's going to be difficult to hear some truths, right? So I want to let everyone know, trigger warning, if you need to take time, if you need to go out and breathe for a bit, if you need to make yourself more comfortable, that's okay. Okay, that's okay. It's not a problem. You can step out, you can drink some water, you can grab some food, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do to make yourself feel comfortable. Also, we ask people to sit on the floor if they're able-bodied. If you need to move around, if you need to shift, that's okay. If you need to take a seat also on one of the chairs, that's okay as well. I just want everyone to know, yoga should never be about putting your body in pain, right? Yoga is actually about creating your such a healthy state of your body so that you can actually focus on the philosophy and so that you can focus on practicing spiritually. That's what it's all about. And so it's important to understand that. So how do you pronounce the word yoga? Yoga comes from the ancient language Sanskrit, the ancient language of Sanskrit, and it is pronounced yog. Does anyone know what the word yog means? Yeah, you can go ahead.
I think that it means to yoke.
To yoke.
Union.
Union. Right. Great. Yes, it does. It means to unite. Right? To unite. What? Unite what? Unite you and your dog? Unite you and your partner? Unite you and your country? What? You and the divine. That's what it actually means. Because when you unite yourself with the divine, by whatever name you call that by, right? Some people call it Krishna. Some people call it Ram. Some people call it Shiv. Some people call it God. Some people call it quantum physics. Some people call it Allah. Some people call it Jesus. Some people call it Jehovah, right? Some people say Buddha. Some people say cosmic void. Some people say consciousness. Whatever you might call it, right? That divine, when you connect with that, you realize that that divine is within you. That divine begins to manifest within you. And when it begins to manifest within you, you start to recognize it in others. And then you start to connect to others because you see it in them. You see it in the tree. You see it in the bird. You see it in the animal. You see it in the fish. You see it in the water. You see it in the sky. You see it in the people around you. You see it in the person yelling at you, right? And because of that, you start to develop a deeper spiritual awareness that allows you to communicate with people at a deeper level. That means you're able to change things at a deeper level. A yogi is always a spiritual activist. A yogi is always a spiritual activist, right? So it's important to understand these things. That's why I'm going to describe to you there's the 4 yogs. There are only 4 paths of yog in the world since time began. Anything that is not these 4 yogs is a bastardized gimmick designed to make money. That's what it is. And it is wrong. And no one should do it because it is not correct. So what is the first yog? The first yog is Gyan Yog. Gyan Yog is the path of knowledge. And Gyan Yog is the path for people who like to meditate, people who like to spend a lot of time in silent contemplation, for people who like to spend a lot of time reading, learning, and who like, it's not necessarily that they like it, but perhaps they're more introverted. So it's easier for them to actually connect with this path. And so for them, the path of Gyan Yoga is open. It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone because it's extremely difficult. Because in the path of Gyan Yoga, you have to negate the I. There is no I. There is no you. Everything is God. So there is no you. You get rid of that. This earth is God. You are God. They are God. He is God. The sky is God. The tree is God. The chair is God. The table is God. These tiles are God. Everything is God. So there is no I. There is no you. There is no relationship. Everything is the same. It's very difficult to do that. Because how do you even go about the world without acknowledging that you live in this body and you are something other than all of these different things, right? But it can be done. It's just extremely difficult. So there is Gyan Yoga. The next yoga is Karma Yoga. This is the path for extroverts, right? People who like to get out and go. People who are people of action. Karma means the path of action, right? Karma means whatever you do in service to the divine. That's what karma is. With your thoughts, your words, and your deeds. Because an action is not just a physical action. An action is your thoughts. An action is the words that you speak. And an action is the actual physical actions that you do. So all of those things, when you line them all up together and your thoughts and your words and your deeds are all consistent in service of the divine, that is a Karma Yogi. That's a Karma Yogi. Very difficult also, but it can also be done. Then there's the third yoga, Bhakti-Yoga. My group is called Seattle Bhakti-Yoga because we're focusing on Bhakti-Yoga. And we will talk more about Bhakti-Yoga, but I'm going to give you a brief description now. Bhakti-Yoga is the path of love and devotion, right? Where everything that you do and all of your spiritual practice is done out of love and devotion for the divine, right? It's not just, oh, I'm going to do everything out of service. It's, I'm going to do everything out of love, right? Because you might love someone and it's not necessarily that, getting them exactly this thing that they want is serving them. You're doing it because you love them, right? You're doing it because you're devoted to their happiness, right? And when you do that, it takes it to a different level. It's a more intimate relationship. It's a relationship. Bhakti Yoga is about developing relationships. Bhakti Yoga is about developing community, right? Where you start to look at everyone as part of the family of God, right? You start to see everyone as a little minute representation of that divine, and you see that love within them. Even when they're yelling at you, even when they hate you, even when they dislike you, right? And even when they say that they're your friend, but they're actually hurting you, right? But how do you recognize it? And how do you dismantle it? How do you dismantle the behaviors that are not divine while still loving the divine within them, right? Bhakti Yoga teaches that path, right? That's what Bhakti Yoga is all about. Then there's the fourth yoga. That's called Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga is where the majority of the Western yogas that we see have taken little bits and pieces of wisdom, torn them apart, bastardized them, utterly corrupted them, and are now selling. That's where that comes from. Ashtanga Yoga is the path of rebalancing your physical body because your physical body is out of alignment in some way. Rebalancing your physical body so that you can take yourself on a path to unite with the divine, right? That's why, in some ways, that's why it's so popular in the West. Because we're so out of balance here. We're so utterly absorbed in our privilege. We're so utterly absorbed in our relentless search for wealth, for money, for status, for power, for all of the things that we think that we're entitled to, right? That this is an attractive path for us. Except the point of this path is to negate that narcissism. But instead, they took the path that was to get rid of narcissism and they used it to feed their narcissism. That's why we have things like yoga pants. Have you ever seen an Indian spiritual master wear yoga pants? So why are they selling them in yoga studios? Why? Because it makes money. Because it feeds into people's narcissism of, I look hot today, right? Because it feeds into that sense of me, mine. What do I get to exploit today, right? So this is what we see every single day. And when we see that, we start to understand that what we're actually practicing is not the correct path of Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga is something far deeper. And at some point, if I get time, I may even tell you a story about that. Or actually, you know what? I'll just tell you now. Excuse me. There was a king. He was so utterly corrupt that he ended up destroying his entire kingdom. His own children died in a war that he created for more power. He created this war. His sons wanted to fight this war because they were just like him. And they ended up destroying the entire kingdom. And at the end of that war, people who were actually good-natured, who had been trying to stop them from destroying the kingdom, right? They ended up winning the war. So they are now ruling the kingdom. But this old king, he's still sitting in the palace. He won't leave. And all of the people are like, we don't want to be rude, but what should we do about this guy? So the prime minister was actually the king's younger brother. And the prime minister was actually a good person. He tried to convince the king, don't do this, follow the right path, be honest, don't be greedy, right? Be a righteous king, don't destroy your people. He tried to convince him, and the king had not listened to his prime minister. So the prime minister then comes to the king and he says, elder brother, are you not ashamed? Are you not ashamed? And he says, well, I mean, I'm embarrassed. Yeah, I'm ashamed. I'm grieving for my sons, but what should I do? And he says, you need to retire to the forest. You need to leave. All of this now, you need to let go of it and let the people who have won the war take over, and they can reestablish the correct path in the kingdom. But you need to leave so that the people can start to heal, right? And so the king says, okay, if you want, then I'll do that. I mean, there's no point in staying. All of my kids are dead anyway, so I might as well go. So his brother takes him into the forest, and he goes with his wife. And when they were in the forest, his brother says to him, okay, you really need to practice yoga, and you need to practice Bhakti-Yoga. You need to establish a relationship with the divine so that you can start to redeem yourself, and you can have a hope of having some type of spiritual destiny. And the king says, I can't do Bhakti-Yoga. I can't love someone and something that I'm not connected to, right? He thought he wasn't connected to God, right? He was like, it's not real for me. I can't do it. He says, okay, Karma Yoga. He says, I can't. I was a king for all of my life. I tried to serve the people and I couldn't do it. Jnana Yoga. I can't still myself enough to actually contemplate. I can't still myself enough to truly learn. This king, it wasn't like he wasn't learned. He was so educated. He was a king, right? He had access to all of the best teachers, all of the best sages. They tried to teach him. He couldn't do it. So his brother says to him, there's only one path for you. Ashtanga Yoga. And he says, what is Ashtanga Yoga? He says, Ashtanga Yoga will begin the process of depolluting your mind. Right? All of this narcissism, all of this selfishness, all of this greed, all of this ambition that was just eating you up inside and ended up eating up the people, right? We need to realign that. We need to rebalance that. And so from that point until the rest of his life, he was practicing pranayama every day. He was doing the postures every day. He was following those paths of meditation every single day until it got to a point at the end of his life when he started to realize, he started to get an inkling of what he had done wrong. It took that long, but it started to work. It started to develop a conscience within him where he started to realize, oh my goodness, maybe I have actually done something wrong. But it takes years. And you have to do it correctly under the correct guidance of the correct master. His brother was a true master. His brother was teaching him how to do it, right? So because he had that guidance, he was able to start correcting his mind, right? So that's what Ashtanga Yoga is actually all about. But we're not going to talk about Ashtanga Yoga because we want to start going deeper into how we can genuinely serve and into how we can genuinely be spiritual activists, right? If we want to truly decolonize yoga, right? If we want to learn how to be bhakti yogis, if we want to learn how to develop love and devotion and manifest that and truly connect, truly develop a relationship with the divine, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I began by letting you know my pronoun, right? And I said, I'm she, her pronouns. And I asked you all to share your own pronouns as well. Because within Bhakti-Yoga, we're developing relationships. And when you're developing relationships with people, you have to understand who they are, right? You have to understand who they are. So gender plays a role in that. And when we're developing relationships with the divine takes many, many different forms. Sometimes the divine is feminine. Sometimes the divine is masculine. Sometimes the divine is non-binary. Sometimes the divine is an animal. Sometimes the divine is some form of nature, right? So it's important to get an understanding of what those different forms mean. Why do those different forms manifest, right? If everything is God and everything is the cosmic void and nothing really matters and everything's just cool and we should all be chill, then why do we see so much chaos around us, right? It's because we do not have a correct relationship with all of the different forms of the divine around us. We don't know how to correctly honor them. We don't know how to correctly respect them. We don't know how to correctly treat them and defend them when they're being attacked, right? And what are they going to be attacked by? They're going to be attacked by forces like that king, who are filled with greed, who are filled with lust, who are filled with this relentless narcissism, this sense of entitlement. It's mine, more, more, more. And we're not going to be able to do that if we haven't decolonized our practice, right? So I'm going to talk to you today about divine masculinity and divine femininity. That's what I'm going to go into today. And it's really important to understand this because divine masculinity and divine femininity exist within all of us, regardless of what gender we are. Regardless of what gender we call ourselves, divine femininity is within us. Regardless of what gender we call ourselves, divine masculinity is within us. And when we can understand that, and when we can start to learn and start to acknowledge what that looks like, how it actually manifests, how to recognize it, not only can we start manifesting that within ourselves, but we can start helping other people manifest it within themselves so that they're not harming others, right? With this corrupt, bastardized sense of what masculinity is, right? With this corrupt, bastardized sense of what femininity is. 2 days ago, I gave a presentation on gender-based violence and the systems of oppression. And there'll be video of that up soon on the Women of Color Speak Out site, YouTube channel. But in that presentation, I talked about how gender-based violence is connected to capitalism, colonialism, racism, and patriarchy, right? And how all of those systems of oppression have led us down this path to climate change, have led us down this path to mass extinction, where we are actually in mass extinction. Scientists have said, they've told us 2 years ago, we're not facing mass extinction, we are already in it. We are at a critical mass. We have to radically change now. There is no time. Because when we're talking about mass extinction, there's only been 5 in the history of this planet. 5 mass extinctions. There's been other smaller extinctions, but when we're talking about mass extinction, we're talking 75 to 90% of all life on this planet, including us, gone. We're at that point, that critical mass. So if we don't change, we're not going to have a future. So that's why it's important to understand what is causing it. What are the root causes? Everyone wants to talk about their cars. But why do we have cars? Why are we forced to drive cars? Why don't we have public transit? Why do we live so far away from where we work? Why do we have to work in these places? Why do we eat in this way? Why are we all so sick? Why is that causing so many financial burdens, right? All of these things are connected to these systems of oppression, right? And all of those systems of oppression are giving us gender-based violence. So that was what that presentation was about. And I recommend that you go and look at it, because I was talking about toxic masculinity. I was talking about how toxic masculinity is manifesting, right? That toxic masculinity is the day-to-day micro manifestations of the wider systemic macro problem of patriarchy, right? That patriarchy is about control. It's about domination. It's about, I'm in a male body, a cis male body, a straight cis male body, a white straight cis male body. Therefore, I have got the most privilege. I'm entitled to the most power. I'm entitled to all of the resources. And everyone who doesn't fit into that gets crushed beneath my boot, right? That is what that system is. That's why we call it the white supremacist capitalist patriarchal empire, right? That's what we live in. That's why white people today are opening up, yoga studios that comes from poor brown people, right? That's why white people today are running sweat lodges on the native land of the people that they stole that land from. And they're running sweat lodges without knowing how to do it, without having permission from those people, right? That's stealing. That's what that is. That's stealing. That's white male entitlement.
And the next word of appropriation.
Right.
Honoring.
Right. So we're talking about cultural appropriation, but the real, that's the nice word. That's the polite word that people use. Cultural appropriation. It's really theft. That's what it is. It's theft. It's stealing, right? And so how to recognize that day to day, right? When we get sexually harassed as we're walking down the street, right? Because your body is an object for someone else to exploit, right? It doesn't matter whether you consent to being spoken to like that. They're going to take it. They're going to say it. They're going to touch you. They're going to talk to you. They're going to talk down to you. They're going to treat you as if that you exist for their pleasure, right? Meanwhile, you know, where it's happening at a macro level, on a planetary level, right? Because Mother Earth is just an object, right? So we can just extract resources from her. Take, mine. Why? I just feel like it. I have all of these devices. I need to power them, don't I? Right? You know, instead of demanding change, we just allow it to keep happening because, well, we want our conveniences. We want to be able to buy clothes every single week. We want to be able to just run our air conditioning units 24 hours a day without thinking about it. We just want to do it. We know it's wrong, but we're still doing it. That's our toxic masculinity coming out because we've been indoctrinated into that system, right? So when you start to truly follow the path of yoga, you start to understand that all of these are different levels of attachment, right? They're different levels of attachment to your body, right? To the conveniences of your body, to the privileges of your body, right? The different levels of your bodily identity that's taking you away from your relationship with the divine. And Mother Earth is another manifestation of that divine feminine, right? And if we're just stealing from her, we're not able to develop a loving, devoted relationship with her. So Bhakti-Yoga, when we start to learn what Bhakti-Yoga is about, we start to realize that Bhakti-Yoga is about being a spiritual activist to develop loving spiritual practice, devoted service to the divine in all of the ways that the divine manifests, right? So in order for us to learn what that looks like, we have to unlearn toxic masculinity and simultaneously learn divine masculinity, right? I'm going to start with divine masculinity because that's where the problem is, right? Is no one ever taught us what any other type of masculinity looks like. All we've ever seen is toxicity. All we've ever experienced is rape culture. That's all we've ever experienced is rape culture. Your consent doesn't matter. We're going to take whether you like it or not. And then if someone sexually harasses you and you say stop, they say, why didn't you just laugh? It was a joke. Because you're supposed to enjoy being exploited. That's your role, right? As a woman, as a femme-bodied person, it's our role to just enjoy being exploited because we exist for the pleasure of men, right? That's the system that we've been taught. We've been indoctrinated into that. So we have to start decolonizing ourselves from that thought process. We have to start realizing I exist for a deeper purpose. I exist for a divine purpose. I'm not just an object. I'm a soul who resides in this body, and I've been given this body to serve. And not just to serve, but to serve with love. Because I have a relationship with the divine, right? The divine knows who I am, and I know who the divine is. And we're like this, right? We're like this. When you realize you're like this with the divine, it doesn't matter how someone else tries to treat you. They'll never be able to touch what's inside. They'll never be able to touch what's inside, no matter how bad it gets. And they'll get bad. Maybe it's already gotten bad. Maybe we need to heal from the different ways that we've been hurt already. It is often the case. It is often the case. We saw from all of those Me Too posts, right? There was no getting away from it. There was no escaping it. It was everywhere. It was highly triggering for most of us because we didn't need to see it. We already knew. And in order to educate men, we all had to trigger ourselves. We all had to re-traumatize ourselves in order to educate the men who know, because we've been telling them already, they just didn't believe us. Why? Toxic masculinity. So we have to start unlearning those processes by learning what divine masculinity actually looks like. So I'm going to tell you some stories. And these stories are ancient stories that come from my people, right? I already told you one a little earlier. And these are stories that come from ancient India. Because in ancient India, we were getting examples of divine masculinity. We were also getting examples of toxic masculinity. And in many of our stories, the divine will often incarnate as a divine masculine, as a divine feminine, in order to defeat patriarchy. That will be a specific goal. There will be some demon, and the demon literally is a serial rapist. And God will come to defeat them in order to liberate women and Mother Earth. That's a specific goal of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. It happens in both ways, depending on the situation, depending on what is necessary. So I'm going to tell you some stories about the divine masculine. The particular form of the divine masculine that I'm going to talk about today is called Krishna. You may have heard the name, Krishna. You may have seen pictures. You may have seen pictures of Krishna dancing with the gopis, right? The gopis. Have you ever seen pictures of Krishna dancing with a bunch of women, right? Did you ever ask yourself, why is he dancing with a bunch of women? Or did you just think that guy's a player? What did you think? That interpretation that I just said is a bastardized, corrupted version of what is really happening. The gopis are bhakti yogis. And they are the most elevated bhakti yogis, meaning they have reached the highest level of enlightenment. You can't get higher than them. And they're all women. They're all women. The most elevated sages in the whole world were all women. And their deepest wish was to have an intimate, loving relationship with Krishna. So he manifested himself in order to fulfill their desire, because they had a relationship and they were like that, right? That's what bhakti yogi, that's what it means to be a bhakti yogi, right? Is to have this continuous desire, right? To deepen your relationship with the divine. And you can call it whatever you want. You can call it by him, her, it, they, them, whatever, by whatever name you want, because different people will have different relationships with their own particular form of the divine. But I'm picking Krishna because Krishna's manifestation of divine masculinity was at a time that was very crooked. There were a lot of really crooked politicians around. There were a lot of really crooked people, a lot of really corrupt people. And it's not like, there haven't been corrupt, crooked people throughout history. But there are certain times in history where someone may have been a bad person, and if they didn't like you, it was clear that they didn't like you. But in Krishna's time, it was a situation where someone might say that they're your friend and invite you into their house to eat and then poison the food, right? Someone might say that you're their friend and then stab you in the back, right? So because Krishna was living in these times where there were people who pretended friendship and were actually betraying you, much like in our society today, where we have extremely crooked people, we may not even know who to trust in our own family. We may have people who are trying to exploit our bodies in our own family. That is how corrupt our society has become. In our own workplace, in our own school, within our own teachers, within our own churches, right? We know this is true. So that's why I'm talking about Krishna, because Krishna can teach us a great deal about how to manifest divine masculinity, even when you're dealing with people like that. So, Krishna, he was born, and there was a prophecy of his birth that the savior will come, right? The divine masculine will take birth, and he will come to destroy the tyrants that exist in this world, the tyrants who are trying to take control, the tyrants who are exploiting women, the tyrants who are colonizing others, the tyrants who are taking over other people's territories simply because they say that they're better than them, right? Capitalism, colonialism, racism, patriarchy, right? The systems of oppression. When they show up, the scriptures teach us the divine will manifest, whether it's an incarnation or whether he manifests within us. And we start to resist. We start to show up. We start to fight, right? That's the divine masculine who will always show up, right? When you see something unjust and you get outraged, that's the divine masculine in you. That's the divine masculine in you, telling you this is wrong, deal with it. If someone's being hurt, defend them, right? If you're seeing injustice, if someone's lying, speak up. Tell the truth, expose them. That's what the divine masculine is. That's who Krishna was. So there was a prophecy that Krishna would show up. He was born. His uncle was actually the one who was the first person that he had to deal with, right? His uncle ended up taking control of the kingdom in a military coup, imprisoned Krishna's mother and father, right? And there was a prophecy when he did that, their own child will destroy you. So then every child that he had, he would kill them. Every child that Krishna's parents had, he would kill their children. And then, of course, when Krishna was born, they, smuggled the baby out. And then he went around the whole kingdom killing babies, right? Interesting story. Does it sound remotely familiar? Yeah, this is a much older story. This is a 5,000-year-old story. Our scriptures say this happened 5,000 years ago. So Gans was his uncle. Gans killed all of the babies. Krishna grew up, eventually came back and destroyed him. Now, Gans's father-in-law, Jarasandh, was just as much of a corrupt king as Gans, right? And he was angry when his son-in-law got killed because the land that they had controlled together, he had now lost a great deal of that land, right? A great deal of those taxes that he was wresting from all those people, all of those women he was exploiting, all of those resources that he was extracting from. He no longer had control. So he started to attack Krishna's kingdom, right? And by the way, Krishna had defeated his uncle, but he didn't become the king. His grandfather, who was the rightful king, he put his grandfather back on the throne. He put his elder back on the throne. And his grandfather said, but you are the one who has defeated the tyrant. You are the conqueror. Krishna said, I'm no conqueror. And just because I defeated someone who was harming us doesn't mean that I'm now entitled. I'm not entitled. Those who have the wisdom, those who have the experience, those who have been serving the people for their whole lives, those are the people who should be in charge. And I will serve. He wasn't entitled. He wasn't thinking, oh, it's mine. He said, I am simply a servant. This is my motherland. It is my duty to serve. So that was the first thing that he said. But now that they are now independent of this tyrant, and Gans's father-in-law was called Jarasandh. Jarasandh started to attack them. He started to attack them, waves upon waves of war, over and over again. 18 times Krishna rode out with his army to face Jarasandh's armies. And Jarasandh was a colonizer. So he had many, many, many kingdoms and territories and armies that he was controlling. And he could keep coming back because he had more and more and more men. But Mathura is standing alone. And that was the name of their kingdom. So they're standing alone against this tyrant, against this colonizer. 18 times they defeat them. And then after that 18th time, Krishna looks around. He looks around at all of his people. He looks around at the dead soldiers. He looks at the widows. He looks at the orphan children. And he says to his people, he says to the court, he says, I have a proposal. And they say, what is your proposal? Krishna says, I propose that we move to a different land. And everyone says, what? And he says, yeah. And they say, what do you mean move to a different land? And he says, I propose that we take our people and we move to a different land that is secure, that is guarded on all sides, so that we don't have to be defeated by this tyrant. And they said, of course we won't be defeated. We will continue fighting. And Krishna said, have you looked around you? Have you looked at the reality of what is around us? How many more of our people are we willing to lose? And they said, what are you talking about? If you're saying we should run away? Krishna said, yeah, I'm saying we should run away. And they said, but this is our ancestral territory. And Krishna said, and because this is our ancestral territory, I'm reluctant to see her steeped in blood. I'm reluctant to see our motherland be covered in the blood of her children. I don't want that to happen. I want to protect our people and I want to protect her. And in order to do that, we need to move. Because the reason why Jarasandh keeps attacking is because of me, right? I defeated my uncle. I fought a war with him and I won, but that war didn't win us anything. It didn't win us peace. It just won us more war. So clearly war is not the answer. Clearly war is not the answer. And he wasn't saying that, we'll just run away from Jarsan and then we'll never deal with him ever again. He was saying, no, we right now are not in a position to win. Therefore, we must strategically retreat. We must put up defenses. We must make sure that we are secure, that we're safe. And once we know that we're safe, then we will create a political solution to bring him down. Because he's a colonizer. That means right now he has an empire. He has too much power. We need to find a way to bring down the empire. That's what Krishna was saying. And they said, but if you run away, the world will call you will call you a coward. And he said, so, I don't care. And they said, but your reputation. And he said, so, I don't care. What does my reputation matter before the people? Because divine masculinity has no ego. Divine masculinity has no ego. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about doing the right thing. Divine masculinity protects. That's what divine masculinity does. And doesn't protect in a way that we're going to lock you up, but protect you in a way that we want you to be free. Right now, you're surrounded on all sides. You're imprisoned. I want you to be free. I want you to be safe on all sides so that you don't have to be continuously afraid and thinking that you're going to be attacked. Right now, every time a femme-bodied person steps out of her home, she knows that she's going to be facing attacks on all sides. She knows it. That's why we have to be continuously guarded. That's why we always have to watch what we wear. That's why we always have to watch what we say and walk at night with our keys in our hand, with our pepper spray in our hand, just in case we get hurt. We're facing attack and assault and harassment on all sides. We are not free. We are not free. And what Krishna was saying was, I want my people to be free on all sides. And I don't want this earth to be steeped in the blood and pain and suffering of her children. And before that, my name and what people call me means nothing. In India, there's a temple in India where Krishna is worshipped as Ranchod. Ranchod means he who runs from battle. He's worshipped as he who runs from battle. Why? Because that was such love from him. It was such love that he was giving up his ego for the benefit of everyone else. That's love. I don't care what everyone else calls me. I don't care. That's not the point here. That's divine masculinity. That's true courage. Divine masculinity is courage. Divine masculinity is humility. Divine masculinity protects. That's what divine masculinity is. And so where did they go, right? So he managed to convince all of his people, we're going to move. They didn't like it. Many of them grumbled, particularly all of the warriors, who were all just like wanting to, no, we can fight. And he said, how long are you going to fight? How long are you going to fight? We thought that violence would fix this. It didn't. How long are you going to continue telling yourself this is the answer, right? There's that modern quote, right? The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, right? War is clearly not the answer. So where did they go? He took his people to Dwarka. Dwarka, you can actually still go in India. It's an island off the northwest coast of Gujarat, which is my family's home state. And it's an island, right? So it's protected on all sides by water, right? Dwarka means the city of gates. And this city, Krishna designed. Krishna designed with divine proportions so that it was perfectly self-sufficient. It grew its own food. It was sheltered. It had it had perfect trees. It had all of the fruit trees and all of the nut trees and all of those things that you would need. And it had lots and lots of ports so people could come and go and still be able to travel and do all of those things to be free, right? Now, is this some physical place that was the answer? Dwarka, the city of gates. These are gates. These are gates. This is a gate. These are gates. All of the orifices of your body are gates. You are Dwarka. And when Krishna moves to Dwarka and resides in Dwarka, you are safe. You are free. You are unafraid. Regardless of all of the dangers around you, you are safe. You are free. You can be unafraid. We are Dwarka. Krishna moved his people to Dwarka and he resided there. And when he moved to Dwarka, the land flourished. The people flourished. They were unafraid. Right? And again, you know, he didn't just leave the whole Jarasandha situation because no, we got to deal with these colonizers, right? We got to deal with empire. Empire is evil. We must stop it. So he created a whole political situation where he was able to bring that guy down. But he didn't do it with armies. He didn't do it with armies. He didn't sacrifice armies anymore. He was like, no more. Doesn't work. So I'm going to tell you about a second story. Also Krishna. Krishna, as I said, he moved his people to Dwarka. The land flourished. It was incredibly rich because they were self-sufficient. They didn't need to go anywhere else, but they were self-sufficient. So then many, many people would come to them to trade with them, to have peace with them, to, you know, all of those things. So Dwarka was flourishing. They were happy. Everyone was great. And of course, they have relatives in different lands. They would, you know, marry their children into different families and all of those things. So there were many different families who had friendships, family connections. And so there was one particular family who lived in what is now modern-day Delhi. If you go to India, modern-day Delhi, that was actually their kingdom. And two branches of the family were at war. The king that I told you about earlier, he was the king of this family. He was the elder of this family. And his sons were the ones who wanted war. His sons were the ones who wanted to control everything. And the other branch were 5 brothers who were from the other side of the family. And what they were doing was they were trying to be Bhakti-Yogis. They were trying to follow Krishna's example. They were trying to follow Krishna's example of serving the people, defending the people, not having an ego, taking care of others. That's what they wanted. And on this side, exploitation of women, colonization, entitlement, greed, lust, never-ending ambition, right? It's never enough. It's never enough. More, more, more. So they came to a point where they were at war. They had declared that they were going to go to war with each other. And the Pandavas didn't want that. The Pandavas were the 5 brothers. And on the other side were called the Kauravas. So there's the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Both of these branches of the family were related to Krishna. So when it came to this declaration of war, both of them went to visit Krishna. Both of them sent people to go and visit Krishna and say, whose side do you want? Right? Because if it does come to the point of war or any type of conflict, right? Any type of challenge, you have to look around you and find out who your allies are, right? You have to look around and see who's on your side, who's going to be with you. Right? When we're resisting any particular, like when we're having a political campaign or when we're dealing with any type of struggle, we have to see who is on our side. What resources do we have? Who are the people who say that they will show up and who are the people who actually will show up? Right? So that's what they did. They started to ask all of their different people, all of their different family members, all of their different friends, whose side do you want? Right? Declare yourself now so that we know, so that it's clear. So both of them got to Dwarka at the same time. From the Pandava side, Arjun went. Arjun was a middle brother. He and Krishna had a very close friendship. And on this side, Duryodhan. Duryodhan was the eldest Kaurav. And he was one of the main villains, I suppose you could say. He was one of the main selfish, greedy, entitled people. And they both got to Dwarka at the same time. Because they're both family members, the god lets them into Krishna's bedchamber. Krishna's sleeping. But these are his family members, so there's no reason to stop the family members from going in, so he lets them in. And Krishna is sleeping. Duryodhan comes in first. Remember, Duryodhan's the villain. Duryodhan comes in first. He sees Krishna sleeping. He's like, I'll have to wait. So he goes and he sits on the side and he's saying, yes, just waiting. Arjun comes in a few minutes later. Arjun comes in. He sees that Krishna is sleeping. Then he sees that Duryodhan is there. He's sitting there. And Arjun comes to the foot of Krishna's bed and he just stands there waiting with his hands clasped. And after a few minutes, Krishna begins to stir. He wakes up, he sits up, he sees Arjun standing right in front of him. He says, Arjun, when did you get here? Did you just come? And Arjun says, yeah. And before he even has a chance to say yeah, Duryodhana says, I got here first. And Krishna says, oh, Duryodhana, you're here too? How nice. And so he says, why are you here? Why have you both come to visit me? It's very pleasant to see you both. Is there something I can do for you? And Duryodhana says, well, it's very sad that, as you know, war has been declared between the Kauravas and the Pandavas. And so I have come because you are my family member. Duryodhana's daughter was married to Krishna's son. So they were in-laws, right? So you can't upset him, because if he's upset, your daughter-in-law is going to be upset. And if your daughter-in-law is upset, then your son is going to have a miserable life, right? So Krishna is knowing that I can't upset Duryodhana in any way. Meanwhile, Krishna and Arjuna are first cousins, right? Krishna's aunt, his father's mother, his aunt was Arjun's mother. So first cousins. So if he does anything to upset his cousin, his aunt is going to be upset. So on both sides, the women of their family, of his family on both sides, he has to try and figure out a way to help them both. So Duryodhana says, I've come to ask for your help in this war. And Krishna looks at Arjun and he says, is that why you're here too? And he says, yeah, that's why I'm here too. And Krishna says, well, you're both my family, so I'll help you both. And Duryodhana and Arjun look at each other. They're like, what do you mean? How can you help both sides in a war? That doesn't make any sense. Of course, it does if you're playing them off each other, right? But Krishna's not that type of person. He's not playing them off each other to gain more power for himself, which is often what America does in our imperialist empire. We'll play different countries off each other in order to gain more power for ourselves. Krishna's not that type of person. Krishna's a divine masculine. So they say, what do you mean? And he says, to one side, I will give my army, my vast, undefeated army. And on the other side, I will give myself, alone, unarmed, for I will not lift weapons in this war. This is not my war, this is your war. I won't lift weapons, but I will be on your side. So you have a choice. You can choose my army, or you can choose me. You can choose my power, or you can choose me. And he says Arjun gets first choice because Arjun is younger. In our culture, if you're younger, you get to choose first. And Duryodhana says, that's not fair. I was here first. And Krishna says to him, yeah, and you're older. All your life, you've been demanding things. You've been saying that you're entitled to things because you're the oldest. Well, now, because he is youngest, he gets first choice. So follow the rules. So Duryodhana says, okay, fine, I'll follow the rules. And he's like, please, 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 let Arjun ask for Krishna, because I really, really don't want Krishna. I want the army. And without any hesitation, Arjun says, I choose you, Krishna. I choose you. And Krishna says, are you sure? Are you sure? Because I will be alone, unarmed. I will not have any weapons. I will not use any weapons. Alone, unarmed. Arjun says, I still choose you. And then Duryodhana is like, yes. But of course he has to pretend like he's sad, right? So he's like, oh, I'm so sad because I was going to choose you, Krishna, but I guess I'll just have to take your vast, undefeated army. And Krishna says, of course, you can go outside and let my generals know that they are now yours to direct so they can go home with you. So Duryodhana says, okay, so sorry about this, but I guess it's just the way it was meant to work out. So he leaves. And Krishna watches him go. He waits for him to be gone. And then he turns to Arjun and he says, why did you choose me? Why? Alone, unarmed? Don't you need the army more? They outnumber you now. And Arjun says, I know that this is a war of righteousness. This is a spiritual war. And in this spiritual war, I cannot win without you by my side. I don't need you to fight my war for me, but I need you to be with me. I need you to be with me. In this story, Arjun exhibits divine masculinity. The divine masculine will never expect someone else to fight their war for them. The divine masculine will never extract labor out of others. The divine masculine, when the divine masculine is present, the divine masculine will always do the work themselves, right? And will show up to help others with their work, but they won't try and manipulate others into doing things for them, right? And yet in our society, all we ever see is men stealing the work that women and femme people have done and co-opting it and saying that it's theirs. All we see is things belonging to people of color and indigenous people being co-opted by white people and saying that it belongs to them. That's all we see. The work that's been done by marginalized people is co-opted. That's toxic masculinity. But here, Arjun is showing divine masculinity. I don't need you to fight my war for me, but I want you with me. Why? Because we have a relationship. And I love you. And you love me. And that's why I need you with me. He says, Krishna, in this war, as a warrior, I need you to guide my chariot. Will you be my charioteer? He asks Krishna, he asks the divine masculine to drive his chariot, right? This is a particular mode of warfare, right? When you're on a chariot and you're a chariot warrior, you have to wage your war from your chariot. But that means that whoever's driving your chariot needs to know how to do it, needs to know how to get through the battlefield, needs to know how to consistently defend you as you're waging your war, to actually shield you from harm while still getting you into the right place so that you can wage the best war. That means you have to have a highly skilled charioteer. The most highly skilled charioteer is always the divine masculine. So Arjun knew that. He knew, I cannot win without you by my side. Will you be my charioteer? And Krishna says, yes, I will be with you. And what did Duryodhana get out of it? Right? What did Duryodhana get out of it? He got God's power. When we look at the world around us, what we find is tyrants always seem like they have all the power. Right? They always seem like they're the ones who have all the power. They always seem like they're the ones winning. They always seem like they're outnumbering you. They always seem like that. They always seem like they've got all the money, they've got all the weapons, they've got all the power, they've got all the connections, they've got all the influence. And yet, when people speak with truth, all of a sudden it turns out tyrants fall. We saw it just in the last month, right? How many Hollywood producers started toppling all over the place because women started speaking up. They refused to be quiet, right? You know why? Because they had courage. They had courage. They were speaking up. They were speaking the truth, dismantling lies, speaking the truth. And then other people were manifesting that courage too. They spoke up to support the people who'd already spoken up. They showed up and it turned into this domino effect. And the more we do it, the more it will happen. The more we do it. That's why you can't stop. You have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it no matter how hard it is. Manifest that courage. Because you're not just defending yourself, you're defending others. Right? And it's your war. It's not someone else's war, it's your war. You have to speak up. You have to do the work. You can't expect everyone else to do it for you. That's what this story teaches us. Right? And this is Arjun's courage, right? He's not worried about how many numbers they have. He's not worried about all of their power and all of their control and all of their influence. He's not worried about how corrupt they are. Of course they're going to be corrupt. Of course they're going to be powerful. Of course they're going to have massive numbers. But who do we have on our side? Right? If you have the truth on your side, if you have love on your side, if you have the divine masculine on your side, you can't lose. But you have to manifest that. And that's not easy. Right? So, another point to bring up, right, is that, well, why did Krishna help Duryodhana, you know? I mean, it's like, yeah, it's this idea that they're both his family members, but Duryodhana's a bad guy. Why did he give him any help at all? Isn't that unfair? Like, that's unfair, right? Except that the truth is, what most people don't understand is, the divine is impartial. The divine is impartial. We are all his children. We are all in his family. So what you ask for, he's going to give you because he loves you. Duryodhana was asking for power, so he gave him power. If he'd asked him for love, but of course he was never going to ask him for love because he's acting from ego. The ego cannot ask for love. That's why when Krishna gave that choice, he knew what Arjun was going to say and he knew what Duryodhana was going to say. Right? That's why when you look at it so often, like particularly, like one really good example is like World War II, right? The Nazis, all of it, somehow for some reason, the Nazis had all of these tanks and all of these bombs because they'd been preparing for war for years, right? They were ready. They had all of this stuff. And yet somehow they still lost, right? Why? Because they were wanting God's power. They were not wanting God's love. And they were using that power to what? Dominate, control, destroy. That's what they were doing, right? And meanwhile, there were people all over the rest of the world. And when we talk about World War II, what so many people think is they think America and England, right? Do you know what country donated the largest volunteer army in World War II? Nope. It was India. 2 million men volunteered. Everyone else had to be drafted. India donated the largest volunteer army. You know why? Because even though India was in the middle of a struggle for resistance from the British Empire, they were trying to kick the British Empire out of India, and they suspended that campaign during World War II because they understood these Nazis are such colonizing tyrants. If they win this war, everyone loses, including us. So it's not just about us right now. It's not about us. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's what is best for Mother Earth. So our people suspended our resistance struggle for our freedom in order to support the British against the Nazis. And our country donated the largest volunteer army. You'll never read that in any history book because they don't want you to know it. All they want you to know is that white men were heroes. Except that the white men were the ones who created the war. The reason why the Nazis wanted their empire was because the British had an empire. The British had an empire, and the Nazis thought that they were entitled because they were white men. That's why that was happening. The Nazis' tactics that they used during the Holocaust to commit genocide upon Jewish people, gypsies, disabled people or people with disabilities, black people, gay people, transgender people. They committed Holocaust against all of these people. The tactics that they used, they learned from the US tactics against the First Nations on this continent. It was the white men who created that war. And it was black and brown people who won it. It was black and brown people who won it. Most people don't know that. That's what actually happened, right? So you have to decolonize your history. You have to decolonize your spiritual practice. You have to decolonize your yoga so that you can truly be a spiritual activist. How can you be a spiritual activist when you don't know the truth? How can you manifest courage and speak the truth when you don't know it? Right? It's important to do so. So these stories, in the practice of Bhakti-Yoga, we tell stories. We chant kirtan, we chant mantras, we chant the divine names. Why? Because when we do that, that helps us to build that relationship. It helps us to connect with that divine, whether it's the divine masculine, the divine feminine. Now I'm going to go into what is the divine feminine? We've talked a lot about the divine masculine. And remember, these are in us regardless of what gender we are, regardless of what gender we identify as. So one thing that you have to understand, which is difficult for people who've been brought up in Western monotheistic religion influences, right, is that the divine masculine and the divine feminine are one and the same. They are non-different from each other. When Krishna manifested on earth as the divine masculine, the divine feminine also manifested. Her name was Radha. And they were divine lovers. And there's many, many different stories about them. We're not going to go into them today. But Krishna himself will talk about the divine feminine. Why? Because the divine masculine does nothing without the divine feminine. The divine masculine will always give credit to the divine feminine. The divine masculine will not pretend. Remember, the divine masculine has no ego. The divine masculine is there to protect divine femininity, right? And the power to protect, the power to defend comes from the divine feminine. And so when Arjuna and Krishna came to the battlefield, right? And it was the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The battlefield of Kurukshetra. It means the field of the Kurus. Arjun's family, their family was called the Kuru family. And these are two branches of the same family, right? So this was the field of the Kurus, the field of their family, the battlefield of their family. And both sides, both armies come to fight this war. And Arjun and Krishna are sitting in the same chariot. And all of these warriors are lined up. The Pandavas on this side, the Kauravas on that side. And they're all lined up. And at that point, Arjun is looking at all of his family members opposite him and at all of his family members next to him. Arjun, by the way, means soft-hearted. Arjun, it comes from the root word ruju, Sanskrit root word ruju. Ruju means soft, soft-hearted. Arjun means soft-hearted. Arjun was the greatest warrior of his time. The greatest warrior of his time was soft-hearted. He was compassionate. He felt empathy. He never waged a war that was for himself. He only ever fought anyone to defend others. That was who Arjun was. That was why Krishna was sitting in his chariot. And when Arjun comes to this battlefield and he looks out this vast ocean of these armies and he says to Krishna, take me to the center of the battlefield so that I can look at both sides equally. So that I can look at both sides equally, so that I can see my brothers and my cousins and my sons and my nephews and my uncles and my grandfathers and my teachers. All of them were there. Their entire vast dynasty. And all of their allies, all of their friends, all of their in-laws, all of their cousins from far off lands who've come to fight this war with them. He says, take me to the center so that I can view both sides equally. Krishna says, okay. Krishna says, okay. He doesn't say what, why, now? We're about to wage a war. He says, okay. He does what he's told. A charioteer is not your boss. A charioteer is your servant. Krishna's divine masculinity is that in a bhakti relationship, because remember, Arjun was a bhakti yogi. He loved Krishna. He said to Krishna, I want you with me, right? We have a relationship. Arjun's a bhakti yogi. And the power of Bhakti-Yoga is such that God himself will consent to your wishes, right? You can say, do this, and he'll do it. Because he has no ego. It's not about him. He loves you. He'll give you what you want. So Krishna says, okay. He takes him to the center of the battlefield. And he says, behold, the vast oceans of your people. All of your people on both sides. Not just your family members, but your people, right? The soldiers. Look upon them to your heart's content. And Arjun looks at them. What's that? 30 minutes. Awesome. Thanks. So he says, look upon them. So Arjun's looking and he starts to tremble. Starts to tremble. His heart starts to pound rapidly. He starts to sweat and he says, Krishna, my heart is beating rapidly. I'm starting to sweat. I'm trembling. My weapons are falling from my hands. My knees are weak. Arjun becomes afraid. The greatest warrior of his time, of his generation, he becomes afraid. His heart fills with grief. And he says, I cannot see the point in this war. Simply for a piece of land, should I kill my own family members? Simply for a piece of land, should I see the destruction of my entire dynasty? Should I allow that to happen? Isn't it better to just run away, to just go to the forest, to just retire and live a spiritual life? Wouldn't that be better for me? And he falls and he puts down his weapons and he says, Krishna, I will not fight. He says, Krishna, I will not fight. What is happening here? Arjun is on the battlefield of life. Arjun is surrounded by patriarchy. He's surrounded by patriarchy. He's facing an army of people that he knows all they want is control and domination, greed and lust. That's all they're manifesting. And he's looking at his own people and he knows that to resist them, to fight them, they're going to have to sacrifice themselves. And even though the people who are on the wrong side are wrong, he still loves them. He's thinking they're going to have to die too. I'm going to have to kill them. Do I want to do that? Do I want to actually go that far? Because you see, when we're in this war of life, when we're in this battlefield of life, you have to kill off the negative aspects of your own character. These addictions, these vanities, these greeds, these lusts that we feel that we're really attached to. We're really attached. We don't want to give them up. We want to hold on to them for the small momentary pleasures that they give us. They will never give us peace, but we're still attached to them, right? So he doesn't want to give them up. He's saying, no, even them, I want to protect them. And in order to convince Arjun of what is the correct path in this situation, of what it means to be a yogi, of what it means to be a jnana yogi, a karma yogi, a bhakti yogi, Krishna recites the Bhagavad Gita. He recites the Bhagavad Gita. If you've studied yoga, you may have heard of the scriptures. This is one of our central scriptures. It's like the cream of all of our wisdom is contained within the scripture. Krishna recites the Gita to Arjun in order to convince him of what it means to be a spiritual warrior. Because this isn't some external war. This is the war that happens in the human heart every single day, in every single moment. Right? And Arjun's dilemma, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of trouble, and by opposing end them. Shakespeare, Hamlet. Hamlet's dilemma is Arjun's dilemma. Should I fight? Should I not? Should I just accept fate? Should I just allow this wrong to happen? Or should I fight it and end it? What is the right path? What is the right path? Now, Hamlet doesn't know the answer and he loses his mind. He goes crazy. And it's a tragedy because he doesn't know the answer. Because Shakespeare didn't know the answer. He was a white man. Krishna was with Arjun in his chariot. And he told him what the answer was. He told him what it meant to be a spiritual warrior. He recited the Bhagavad Gita. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjun says, my doubts are dispelled. My grief is allayed. My heart is full and strong. My limbs are strong again. And he picks up his weapons and he says, Krishna, I'm ready to fight. And not just ready to fight for this piece of land, but ready to fight for you. I'm your servant. I'm your servant. Remember, this started off with him ordering Krishna, take me to the center of the battlefield so that I can look upon these armies. Right? It starts off with Krishna being the servant. And it ends with Arjun saying, I'm your servant. I'm your servant. I'm ready to fight for you. Right? So, what is the divine feminine? Krishna tells us in the Gita. He explains what his feminine qualities are. What are the qualities of divine femininity? Krishna says in chapter 10, verse 34, he says, among women, I am fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, patience. Among women, I'm fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, patience. So what does that mean? He's saying these qualities are divine feminine qualities. And these qualities are what you're going to need to win this war. So fame, what does that mean? Fame, right? Now, don't forget, Arjun was the greatest warrior of his time, and everyone knew it. Everyone knew Arjun is the greatest warrior of our time. The other side was particularly worried about Arjun. Even though they outnumbered his side, they were really worried about Arjun. What are we going to do about Arjun? What are we going to do about Arjun? Right? So he was famous. But why was he famous? He was famous because everything that he did in service to others. Right? He never did to get glory for himself. That is true fame. That is true fame. God is famous, right? Who hasn't heard of God? Whether you believe in God or not, everyone's heard of God, right? Does God walk around telling everyone how awesome he is? Does God walk around demanding people worship? No, and yet somehow everyone's heard of him. That's fame, right? The fame that you don't have to work for, it automatically happens because what you do is in service to others, because what you do comes from love. That is fame, and that is divine femininity, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be a woman in order to be famous. It's in everyone. But that's true fame. Remember, Krishna was Ranchod, he who ran from battle. Everyone said, your reputation will be ruined. Everyone will call you a coward. He said, I don't care. I don't care. It didn't matter to him. And yet, he still did it. Everyone still called him a coward, and yet he was famous. And yet people are coming to him, asking him for help in their wars, right? He's being worshipped as Ranchod. Why? Because it comes from love. Because it comes from divine masculinity. Because it comes from divine femininity. That's fame, right? That's fame. So when we manifest that fame, right? When we start doing things for the right reasons, when we start negating our ego, right? People will start to hear about what you're doing. Standing Rock is a really good example of this. Standing Rock, there was no leader of Standing Rock. Did you see anyone saying, I'm the leader of Standing Rock, I'm the central person, me? No, humility and leadership. Standing Rock was a very good example of divine femininity, right? Because it wasn't about ego, it was about what? The water. The water. Water is life. Defend life, defend water. It was coming from love. We're here to defend all of you. That's what it was. And they called themselves water protectors, right? What's that? That's the divine masculinity and the divine femininity united. There's a relationship there. That's love. So when that fame comes about, that automatically happens, right? People start talking about you. People started sharing it, sending money, donating. People started coming from all over the country, from different parts of the world. People started coming to support. People were getting the word out. That's fame. When you start doing that, you go to fortune. What is fortune? Is fortune money? No. Fortune is not money. It might manifest as money, as we saw, donations, gifts. People were sending all kinds of help, right? But real fortune is love. Real fortune is peace. Real fortune is unity, right? How many people came together? How many people started saying, we're here to help you? Veterans showed up. US veterans from the military showed up at Standing Rock, and they said, we're here to help you. Even though our veterans are veterans of colonizing wars, where we have sent our armies over to other countries to hurt those people, to take their resources. Right? So these soldiers are people who have had to fight those wars, whether they wanted to or not, right? And they suffer PTSD from it, right? We all know this, that our veterans suffer deeply and they don't get any help. No matter what the VA wants to say, they don't get help. Those veterans showed up. They said, finally, we might get a chance to actually honor our oath. We took an oath to defend this land. They're finally getting a chance to honor it. To defend the water, to defend the land, right? How amazing was that? That was fortune. That was fortune. Then fine speech. Fine speech. When you're manifesting divine femininity, you'll be able to convince everyone of what you're talking about. You'll be able to convince them. The power of your words will reach them. MLK had this amazing gift. He would be able to reach people. The power of his words was so strong. It didn't matter where they were, he could inspire them, right? That's fine speech. And when you got that, that's why when you saw Standing Rock, right? They didn't say we're activists, they said we're water protectors. That resonated with people. They were like, oh, they're protecting the water. That's fine speech, right? They changed the language that you expect, and they changed it to divine feminine language, right? They brought up something that is rarely seen in movements led by white nonprofits. This was led by indigenous people on their land, defending their water. They were manifesting divine feminine qualities, divine masculine qualities. That's why it was so powerful, right? That's why it was so powerful. Why? It was negating the ego. It was manifesting love, right? Fame, fortune, fine speech, memory. Memory is the next one. Because when you manifest fame, fortune, fine speech, that's all great. But if you've forgotten why you're there, right? If you forget, let's say you're at the front lines. Let's say the cops in minus 10-degree weather start spraying you with water. That's what they did at Standing Rock. It was the atrocities that the police committed at Standing Rock, at rallies all over the world, whether you're talking about for fossil fuels, whether you're talking about for Black lives, whether you're talking about for queer and trans rights, whether you're talking about for women's rights. These atrocities we see over and over again, right? When you're in that moment, when you're being attacked, if you don't remember what you're there for, you're going to panic. You're going to panic. You're going to lose all of the strength that you had when you came there. So memory, you have to practice with memory. That's why when you show up on the front lines, you have to remember why you're there. You have to be continuously reminding yourself and reminding others, why are we here? We're here to defend the water. Why are we here? Water is life. When they were on the front lines there, they would chant, water is life. What was the language that they used? Miniwichoni, Lakota language. Water is life. They would chant that because they were reminding themselves. And if you were there at the camp, were any people there at the camp here? Can you raise your hand if you were there?
How many of you know about Standing Rock?
Yeah. So basically, Patty and I were there, right? And even when you weren't on the front lines and you were just in different parts of the camp, people would say it. People would like shout it out. And then other people would say it back. They would respond, Miniwichoni, to remind everyone, water is life. Water is life. Don't forget why we're here. We're water protectors. Water is life, right? Intelligence. Fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence. When you manifest that memory, right, you will manifest intelligence. When that moment comes about, when you get attacked, you won't just react out of panic. You will know what to do because you'll be ready, because you've trained, because you've studied, you know what you're doing, you know why you're there, right? And you're ready for that moment. So then you go into whatever tactics you have. And this is, I'm using this example of Standing Rock, but we could be in our workplace dealing with sexual harassment. We could be in our home dealing with some family dynamic. We could be at school. We could be in college. We could be anywhere on dealing with some conflict. And when you manifest these divine feminine qualities, right, you can win. You can win. So when you practice with memory, right, when you're manifesting fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, right? It takes you to steadfastness. You're not going to back down. You're not going to back down. You're not there to lose. You're there to win no matter how long it takes, right? No matter how long it takes. It's very important because some people, they get tired. They get tired. They don't want to do it anymore. It's been too long. Why can't we just go home? Right? They're not manifesting divine feminine qualities. They're not truly acting from their heart. Because when you're acting from the heart, this isn't about you. This isn't about them. This is about love. This is about justice. This is about truth. This is about Mother Earth, right? This is about freedom. We want to be free. And you're not going to go home until people are free. Because it's not just about you, it's about future generations, right? Remember, I was talking about the fact that we're in mass extinction. That means the future of life on this planet is at stake. That means we don't have the luxury of going home. Now, people with privilege, they do. People in the global north, they do, because they have global north privilege. They're not going to be hit as hard as the people in the global south. They're not going to be hit, particularly if they're white. If they're POCs in POC communities, no, they're definitely going to be hit as hard. They're going to be starving. They're going to be dealing with famine and drought and flood. Well, what are we seeing right now? Look at Puerto Rico. Did they get any help? Why? They're brown. That's why. We all know it, right? So this is it's happening right in front of our eyes, right? So if we're not steadfast, we're not going to win. So when we manifest these divine feminine qualities, we need to manifest steadfastness, right? Doesn't matter how dangerous it gets, and it will get dangerous. When the cops are spraying water at you in minus 10 degrees temperature, that's dangerous. There were people who went into hypothermia. There were people who went into shock, right? There were people with all kinds of injuries, yeah? But they stayed. They didn't leave the camp. They stayed. They were still there. Why? Steadfastness. They were there for love. So we've got fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, patience. Patience is the last one. This isn't, like I said, it's not just about us. It's not just about them. It's not just about this generation. And it's not going to be easy, right? It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. There are going to be continuous roadblocks. Our ego will continuously rise up. Your war, the battlefield of Kurukshetra, is you and your ego. You are continuously warring with your ego. And most days, let's face it, your ego wins. Most days. Because it's just easier. It's just easier to give in. It's easier to give in to, the desire for, sleep. Instead of, no, I'm going to go up, I'm going to get up and go to that Black Lives Matter rally. Or, oh, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to work and I'm going to deal with this sexual harasser who's so problematic for so many people in this workplace, right? Or, it's just so much easier not to talk to my racist uncle about how racist he is. It's just easier just to let it go, particularly if you have privilege. Right? The war, the real war that Krishna is talking about is between you and your ego, right? Patience is necessary because it's a continuous war. You're not just going to win it and then you're fixed. It's not like, oh, you can go and do this one anti-racism training and then you're not racist anymore. That's not how it works. You have to be continuously working. You have to be continuously on your guard. You can't just do one anti-patriarchy training and that's it. Toxic masculinity is over. No, all of my internalized oppression just disappeared. No, it's a continuous war. It's a continuous battle, right? So that's why you need patience so that you can be continuously ready to fight this war. There are going to be days where it's so hard. There are going to be days where you're so tired, right? Arjun crumbled. All he had to do was look upon all his people and he crumbled so easily. And Krishna had to tell him the whole Gita. The name Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita means the song of God, right? God had to sing all of his wisdom, all of the wisdom of the whole world, of all of creation. All of that wisdom, he had to sing it in order to give Arjun strength, right? In order to manifest these divine masculine qualities, these divine feminine qualities, so that Arjun could have patience with himself, right? So that he could be steadfast, so that he could remember why he was here. One of the things Krishna says to him is, do you think this is about you? Do you think this is about you? Do you think this is about them? Do you think this is about this piece of land? It's about Mother Earth, Arjun. It's about the dignity of women, Arjun. It's about righteousness, Arjun. It's about victory of truth over lies, Arjun. That's what this is about. Do you think this is about you? Remember why you're here, right? The whole time, Krishna was reminding Arjun, and intelligence, he was giving him the wisdom for him to know what to do. And when that happens, fame, fortune, fine speech, remember the song of God. Nothing is more fine than God's own speech. And within the practice of Bhakti-Yoga, that's why we chant mantras, we chant kirtan. Kirtan means the names of God. The finest speech is the name of God. Whatever name you use, it's up to you. That's your relationship with God. That's your personal relationship with God. That's private. If you want it to be private, if you want to share it with people, great, right? But that's why we do that, because it's fine speech, right? It's sacred vibrations. And when we manifest those sacred vibrations, we're manifesting the divine feminine within us. And wherever the divine feminine is, the divine masculine will show up, because he can't be without her. He can't be without her. That's why we say Shri Krishna. Shri is her. She is Shri. That's where the word Shri comes from. It's she. Right? Radha, the divine feminine. Krishna will not accept bhakti without the divine feminine present. Why? Who is the divine feminine? Love. That bhakti means love. Right? When we manifest that love, when we walk the path of Bhakti-Yoga, right? That's when the divine masculine shows up. That's when we get that courage. That's when we get that strength. That's when we negate the ego and we say, it's not about me, it's not about you, it's not about anyone else. It's about what's true, it's about what's right, it's about what's just, it's about love, it's about unity, it's about our people, it's about the future of life on earth, right? It's about Mother Earth. That's when we start to manifest that memory. Who is this really all about? And who are we? Who are we? Who are you? And why are you here? Right? You are a spiritual warrior. And it is your duty to fight for justice. That is what Krishna tells Arjun. He says, Arjun, who are you? And Arjun says, I am the son of my mother, Kunti. And then he says, no, Krishna, he says, no, Arjun, who are you? And he says, I am the disciple of my guru, Drona. And he says, no, Arjun, who are you? And Arjun says, I'm a warrior. He says, right. Because if you were not a warrior, you wouldn't be the disciple of your guru. If you were not a warrior, you wouldn't be the son of your mother. She raised warriors, Arjun. Who are you? You are a warrior. It is your duty to fight for what is just. That is what it means to be a spiritual activist. That is what it means to be a bhakti yogi. And to fight how? With love, with devotion. That's what this is all about. So, we have less than 10 minutes left, is that right? Mm-hmm. What is the time right now? 7:51. Okay, great. So what we can do is we can take some questions. It might go over if we're taking questions. Is it okay with everyone if it goes over? Is that okay with the space? Is it okay with everyone else? You might have to leave. Okay. Is it okay with everyone else? Okay, great. So we'll take questions. Raise your hand and try to be brief so that I can get to the answer as quickly as possible. Questions? And that's okay to sit with it. We don't have to rush into anything. You can sit with it. My guru, he encourages questions. He's always encouraging questions because often people don't realize they have a question until someone else asks it. And then when they hear the answer, they're like, oh, I was wondering that. You know, so it's like when you ask a question, you're not just helping yourself. It's not about you. It's about everyone, right? It's about opening up that door to learning more, to learning wisdom.
I can start.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people are wondering, like, you know, we want to see the benefits of yoga in our lives. So how can we then practice yoga? Like, what is the correct way to practice it?
Very important question. So the correct way to practice yoga is to find a true lineage, a true spiritual master who teaches yoga, a true yogic master who teaches yoga and then to take consent from him, to learn from him, her, whoever it is, right? To learn from them, right? With consent. And then to practice what they are teaching you with full devotion to their teachings. It's not like, oh, I'm going to take a little bit from here, take a little bit from there, and then just, do what I want. That's not true devotion. That's not true bhakti, right? To actually learn from, go to find a guru, learn from your guru, learn from that lineage, right? And to practice that. It is not your right to learn from that lineage and then go and make money. That is not the correct way to practice yoga, right? So it is not something where, oh, I went and I did a teacher training course and now I'm going to open up my own studio. That is the incorrect way to practice yoga. You have no right. You have no right. There is also this sense that, people, it's like, oh, they understand that like it's not their right, and they understand that, it's really stealing, but they still want to get the health benefits of yoga, right? They still want to get the health benefits of Ashtanga, of pranayam. You are not entitled. That's very important to understand. You are not entitled. Unless you are given this by a guru who has consented to teach you, you are entitled to nothing. That's very important to understand. Otherwise, you're still stealing. Now, the good news is there are many, many gurus who are out there, who are teaching, who have yoga videos. If you go on YouTube, you can do a search for different teachers, and when you do searches for teachers, when you're looking for teachers, it's not enough just for them to say, I'm a yogic master. Who is their guru? Who is their guru's guru? Who is their guru's guru's guru? If you don't see a disciplic lineage, they are not legitimate. That's very important to understand. So you have to go to an actual correct lineage that has a true disciplic lineage from ancient times, because that's how you know it's going to be legitimate. There are many people practicing corrupted versions that has no legitimacy, and it will take you down the wrong path. It will confuse you in all kinds of different ways, right? So that's not correct. What is correct is to learn from a true guru, take consent, practice it, and practice it within yourself and share it with others. It doesn't mean that you can't share with others what you know. It means you can never make money out of it. And it means that when you share with people what you know, you say, this is who I learned it from. I learned it from this guru. You always point people back to the direct source so that you are not the guru. You are not the big teacher now that everyone worships. I am not a guru. I am not a guru. I am a teacher. I have different spiritual teachers who have guided me, and the person who gave me permission to basically go and kind of share what I know with people is Swami Mukundanand. My own personal teacher is Ramesh Oza, who is an incredible spiritual teacher, and I have different influences who all gave me consent to learn these practices, right? And with the consent of my guru, because my guru says, no, definitely go and learn. Right? But that is important, that you are going to legitimate sources and you are learning from legitimate sources. A true guru is never going to tell you never learn, right? Or never ask questions or only hear. That's not what will happen. A guru will guide you in a way so that you learn, you have access to wisdom, and you are also not corrupted by corrupt sources of wisdom, right? So if they say, this is not correct, we don't want you going there, it will be because of that. It will be because there is some corruption within that system that they are warning you against, right? So that is important to understand. Never make money, never pretend like it's yours, never co-opt it, always redirect people towards the actual source. And whatever benefit you get out of it, make sure that you give back to that lineage, right? Make sure that whatever you are doing in service for that guru, for that lineage, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, whether it is, for example, Swami Mukundanand, his guru began hospitals and schools that were free for people in India so that poor people could go. And so his disciples here will donate, right? So they're getting the benefits of all of this wisdom. They want to donate so that they're able to continue treating and helping people. Right? Within Texas right now, which is where his headquarters are, they're building a temple and a yoga hall where all of the classes will be for free, right? Because this is not something that you commodify. This is not something that you make money out of, right? They're doing it the correct way. Take care. Bye. They're doing it the correct way. That's how you do it. So does that answer your question? Does anyone have any follow-up questions to that?
Mm-hmm. Not directly what we were talking about, but right now I'm seeing a lot of like right-wing Hindu agenda to use yoga and say that this is our, so I'm Indian, and I've had people write me and say like only Hindu people can teach yoga, only Hindu people should be sharing yoga. And this is where we come from, and I identify with like this is where we come from, it is ours, but I don't fully agree with what is happening in the name again of yoga by taking it and then trying to say other people don't have access. So I'm curious your thoughts on this.
So this is where decolonizing is very important, right? So there are going to be people who have their own agendas. There are also going to be people who want to protect our wisdom, right? Who want to protect our wisdom and who want to defend it from being corrupted and who want to defend it from being stolen, right? For the last 50 years, we've seen our wisdom of yoga being stolen systematically and people profiting off it. And it is literally the theft of our people, the theft of our ancestors, the theft of our land. So there are different cultural, spiritual practices from all over the world that belong to those lands. The people who teach those different spiritual practices should be people of those lands. That is how it should be. If you are someone who has been accepted by a guru, and that guru has shared wisdom, and that guru has given you permission to teach that wisdom, even if you are not of that particular bloodline or that particular race, or you were even born there, right? But you are now within this disciplic lineage, then you have a right to teach it. But if you do not have that permission, and if you have not put in the work to actually get to that point where someone will give you that permission, no, you should not be teaching it. And you see, there are people who are not Hindu, have no respect for this path, this is our wisdom. They have no respect for that whatsoever. In fact, they will say terrible things about Hinduism and then call themselves yoga teachers while making money off of our wisdom, right? It is not that we should not be critiquing society. It is not that we should not be critiquing corrupt things within our society. It is that we should not be allowing other people to take advantage of that to steal from us. So yeah, when it comes to who should teach yoga, because if you've been accepted into a disciplic lineage, that means you're now Hindu. So yeah, now you have a right by the consent of your lineage to teach. You don't have to be Indian. It's not a race thing. It's about whether or not you've done the spiritual work to get to that point where you are at that level of consciousness to be able to teach. And this is true. We have many, many gurus from all over India who have disciples from many different races, from many different parts of the world. They have taught them how to teach. They have sent them to teach, right? They have sent them back to their lands to share that wisdom with their own people so that they can benefit from that. The sages of India didn't put any copyright on our wisdom because it was for the world. But that doesn't mean that anyone has the right to steal from us. So that is how it is very important to decolonize ourselves. Because what we see is many people use the propaganda and will say, oh, but that's right-wing people, that's just right-wing people. Meanwhile, no, it's totally fine. You know, all you white people or you know, all of you people who have no right can just carry on. And people use that as an excuse. Oh, those are just the right-wing Hindus. You don't need to listen to them. It feeds in to this continuous mentality of colonization where we can take and take and take. And anything that you say to defend yourself is wrong. So that is also a big problem. That when we try to defend ourselves, people say, you're an extremist. Think about that. Yeah, it's a serious problem. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people with their own agendas. But it is very important for us to actually understand what is really happening here. Where is the colonization happening here? Right? Who is colonizing who here? Who is defending what? If you're trying to defend your own wisdom and people are like, you're an extremist, I have total right to use whatever belongs to you, who's wrong? Who's the extremist? Who's the tyrant? So it's very important to understand that. Any other questions? Do you have any, Patty?
It's my tomorrow.
So that's actually a good thing. So tomorrow in this space, 6 to 8, there will be Indigenous Feminism. There will be a talk on Indigenous Feminism, a presentation. Patty will be presenting on that. And Patty has many ancestral backgrounds, but is half Native Alaskan, is also descended from the Iroquois on the East Coast, and is part Taino, part Black, part Irish. And so Patty comes from many different Indigenous ancestors. And so we'll be sharing some of that wisdom of Indigenous feminism, how to decolonize our feminism. Right? How to actually understand where feminism comes from. Because as you can see from this ancient wisdom, a great deal of importance was put on the divine feminine. A great deal of respect was given to the divine feminine and to the rights of women and to the rights of people who don't fall under the male identity. Right? And so how do we understand that? How do we truly reconnect with that? No matter what part of the world we come from, and no matter how much we are colonized, how can we decolonize ourselves enough to actually start to reconnect with Indigenous feminism? Patty will be talking about that tomorrow.
And also understanding how much of the current feminism movements have been co-opted from Indigenous feminism. Like the suffrage movement was really co-opted from European women. That's a whole other story.
But you'll hear all about it tomorrow.
Live streams as well. So.
Any other questions before we go? You can also, my card is outside on that table there. If you have questions, but maybe you're too shy, or maybe it can't, a question surfaces later on, feel free to email me. You can email me and let me know. And I'm happy to answer your questions. I do a lot of traveling, so it might be a few days or maybe a few weeks before I get back to you, but I will definitely get back to you.
So make a couple of announcements.
Mm-hmm.
So hey everyone, my name is Michelle with Organize Florida. This is the Organize Florida office. So we're a community organization that does a lot of political work, civic engagement, just a lot of stuff, and it's based on justice, right? Racial justice, reproductive justice. So if you're interested in getting more involved, have your information or talk to me afterwards. So that's one announcement. Also, we're so lucky to have Zarna here and Patty and John, and they're traveling and just giving us all this wisdom. So I'm asking if you can please, if you're able to give a donation to cover for the expenses. I'm gonna just pass this around. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciated all of you and sitting so patiently and listening so attentively. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Of course. Also, I forgot to mention, so on my card, it says Seattle Bhakti-Yoga. You can actually go on SoundCloud and look that up and you will find all of the podcasts. And you can search for me on Facebook, and you can message me on Facebook. I have a public page and I have a private profile. The private profile doesn't have any pictures of me or anything like that because I get attacked a lot for the work that I do by right-wing forces. And so, but you can message me either and find me there. You can find Women of Color Speak Out. That's our group, our sisterhood. That's on Facebook as well. WOC Speak Out. And our website is wocspeakout.com. So you can always be in touch with us there. And on YouTube, you can look for me, Zarna Joshi, or Women of Color Speak Out. If you look for me, you'll see a bunch of hate videos. A bunch of hate videos. Because that's what happens. You do the work and you get attacked. And That's when you have to manifest courage. That's when you have to manifest steadfastness. That's when you have to manifest patience.
That's another question is like, what is it like in your community, or is your community that you're traveling and connecting with spaces like this? But back home where you are, what are you doing in your within the Bhakti-Yoga?
So this started in Seattle, and that's where my community is. And I began this group as a way to activate the yogi community, you know, because Seattle has 1 million obnoxious yoga studios all over the place on every street corner. And yet they do nothing to do the real work. They show up and they're entitled and they make money and do nothing to really deserve it. And so it was to activate those people and to give activists a spiritual place for them to heal and regenerate and to also look deeper within themselves to begin to generate spiritual activism within themselves, because it's not all about anger. Yeah, you should be angry when things are wrong, when injustice is happening, you absolutely should be outraged. But the motivation for that anger should be love. It shouldn't be fear. It shouldn't be hate. And so in order to do those two things, that was why I actually began Bhakti-Yoga with the permission of Swamiji, and who actually was the first one to actually say, "Why are you not teaching?" And I was like, "What?" And kind of tried to ignore it for a while, and then it became clear that he wasn't just suggesting it. And so, a suggestion from a guru is not a suggestion. So, and of course, this is one of the reasons why so many people don't want to do the work, because they want to be entitled to everything, but they don't want to actually do the work, right? That's why so few people have a right to teach. That's why you have to be Hindu to teach this path, right? And we have to understand that. If we don't understand that, we're going to do all kinds of, the other day someone was asking me, "Oh, I want to wear a bindi. Can I wear one?" And I said, "Are you Hindu?" Because this means I am Hindu. This is an identity marker. I am Hindu. That's what this means. Are you Hindu? And they said, "No." And I said, "Then you can't."
There's a huge right now appropriation there's a lot of stealing of yoga within people of color.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure that's everywhere, but in Seattle,
it's huge.
There's a huge urgency, especially for our group, because we know a lot of activists and organizers who are totally co-opting yoga and making trap yoga, a whole bunch of stuff, and
it's horrendous.
Hypersexualization, and it's one thing to have an expression of sexualization to make things people of color things, but knowing where it comes from, knowing how to co-opt it,
and that is not within this path of yoga either. To sexualize it is not within this path either.
Spiritual work behind it.
Yeah. It's pretty extreme. It's happening. Like there was one that was the yoga of Black Lives Matter. And not once did any of those black people who were putting that together actually ask permission of the people who are of this lineage.
Money for the Black Lives Matter organizations, because I wrote on it and I was like, well, what Black Lives Matter organization is it going to? Because there's no website that says Black Lives Matter.
And Seattle doesn't actually have anything called Black Lives Matter because it's not secure. We have groups that go by other names because it's not safe for them. So when they say the yoga of Black Lives Matter, where is this money going to?
Where's it going to place?
But they were just using it. It's like, we're going to do this. And that happens a lot, right? And yet this is people of color. You know why? Because the people of color have also been indoctrinated by this white supremacist patriarchy that we live in, that they can also take and exploit from other people of color because they're entitled. They're entitled. And instead, it's like, there are people who are doing yoga that you can go to them from their lineage. You can learn from them and they will give it to you freely. You don't have to steal. You don't have to steal. You don't have to create this system of just perpetuating trauma, right? Don't do that. But they didn't listen and they continue still. And meanwhile, we're trying to heal people. Carry on.
Well, can you give do you know anybody in the area of who we can turn to maybe to start learning?
Are there temples in the area?
I don't know. I don't know.
So this right here is an indication of what's so wrong, right?
Oh, yeah,
because and this is
say.
yeah, absolutely, right. So this is an indication because we see this in so many areas, in basically every single area I've almost ever been to, right? Is that it's like, do you know what's happening in this area? Do you know what's happening? Where are the temples, right? Where are I guarantee if you go to a temple, there will be temples who do yoga classes, right? There will be temples where they're offering this from their lineage, but all of these people are like, oh, we're going to start our own yoga studio. And then people's like, oh, well, that's, there's a yoga studio in my, apartment building affiliated with nothing and no one, right? So my advice for you would be to look around and see if there are any temples in the area. Find out what lineage those temples are from, right? Like, and see, like, does this come from, like an ancient lineage? And then, check and see if they're giving any yoga classes. And if they're not, right, because maybe there aren't any temples, maybe there aren't enough, Hindu people in the area. If they're not, then you can actually go online and you can go on YouTube. You can go on all of these places and you can actually look for resources and find. And then these people have websites. They're all online. Well, not all of them. Many of them who are trying to help people in the West heal and trying to help people in the West do the right thing, they are offering resources. So that would be the next step. So the first step is check in your own area, look around, ask, and then go to those classes. And then if not, then, then check online, see what you can find and what you resonate with, right? Because it's not just this idea of like, oh, this is a guru and then I'm going to sick myself on him, right? You have to have a relationship with your guru, right? Like there has to be, like, you have to love your guru, right? If you don't love the person teaching you, you're not going to learn from them, right? You're not going to learn from them because your heart's not going to be open, and they themselves are not going to want to teach you because that relationship is not there. So it's this, and also one thing as well is that don't feel anxious if you don't find a guru immediately. Right? What you can do is you can read texts, right? What you can do is you can read texts. You can watch those YouTube videos. You can read up, you can study. And through studying, you can continue your practice and pray, right? Bhakti-Yoga, it's about building a relationship, and God operates on a consent basis. That's why you have to pray, because until you say, I want you in my life, until you say, I want a guru, your guru's not going to show up because your guru's not going to force themselves on you. They're going to want to know that you want them there. And God is going to want to know that you want God there. And then when you see that, you'll start to notice that these things will show up. Right? So don't feel anxious. Don't worry if it doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes it might take years. That's okay. It will happen when you're ready. It will happen when you're ready. And meanwhile, there are texts. I recommend, like, this is my travel copy, but I recommend that you actually order Bhagavad Gita translation by Swami Mukundanand. It's online. You can order it online. You can actually, if you go to jkyog.org, jkyog.org, and you can order their books. You can watch videos of him speaking on YouTube. He's really, he shares the wisdom in such a precise, concise, wonderful way. You can do that. But that's something that is recommended because it's hard, particularly when we live in a colonized Western world where most people don't know where to go. And that's one of the other reasons why, if I visit an area and, often I'm invited, but, I don't just show up somewhere. I'll wait for someone to ask me to be here, right? Because again, I operate on a consent basis, it's not this thing of like, I'm going to impose myself on people. It's this idea of, is there a need here? Do you want this? Is there a need for healing? And there almost always is, right? But that has to be known. So that's why I show up. And then also you can go to, SoundCloud and listen to my podcast as well and start to learn from those. I absolutely give you my consent. That's why I put them out there so that people can learn and listen. Any other questions? Did you have any questions, John? No? Okay. Didn't want to leave you out.
I will say that, because I know you're not going to talk too much about what you're doing, or I'll do it. Some other work that Zarna does a lot is working with a lot of youth working with a lot of healthy masculinity circles. We have a lot of men of color who do a lot of organizing, and I mean everywhere, but we've got a lot of diverse communities, and so each one is so different and has very similar issues of colonization and patriarchy and unhealthy masculinity that Zarna worked on a series, and you can check it out on our Facebook as well. A series in response to a lot of the patriarchy that our group experiences, she experiences, all of us have experienced somehow in some different, volume. Like, she made these amazing videos in response about unhealthy masculinity, in response to patriarchy, and I would really recommend everybody watches those. And I mean, I feel like that's a prerequisite to all my relationships now. No joke. Like, if you can't have a discussion with me, if you can't comfortably sit there and deal with it, and then we can't even, I don't know, even go further. But I mean, there's that, and then we constantly share work in other lectures that we do. We have YouTube videos of Zarna's lectures, and there are 3 others of us in the group. This is just 2 out of the 5 of us, and they all are from different communities doing different work. We have Yin, who does a lot of direct action work, a lot of restorative justice work, and a lot of youth mentorship work and anti-Blackness within the Asian communities. And so Yin is Taiwanese identified, Asian American woman, and then Afrin is one of our medicine women of the group. She does Ayurveda, and she actually hosted an Ayurveda conference in Seattle last week or the weekend before last. She went back to India and studied traditional Ayurveda.
And she is also from India.
And she's also from India as well.
Yeah.
Has done a lot of work within the tech industry, and now is doing work within medicine and health. And then Sarah is currently getting her PhD in the South right now.
In sustainable communities.
In environmental justice. She's one of our founding Black Lives Matter organizers of Seattle.
Yeah.
She identifies as both Black and East African. And Sarah does amazing just political work, but also grassroots work. And she does it both so well. I'm trying to get something. I don't even know. But that's all.
So one of the amazing things that Sarah did was she was a student at the University of Washington, which is just one of the grossest campuses you've ever been to in terms of patriarchy, rape culture, the fraternities. Greek Row is where all of these fraternities are, and they're just basically places where gang rape happens just all the time, and she did a rally called Check Your Privilege Rally, where they basically held this rally to protest this on Greek Row, to protest this fraternity culture and to talk about the rape culture, to talk about consent. And so many amazing women showed up and shared their stories and said, this is, and it's what is consent? We don't even teach that to our youth. We don't even teach that to our young women and men and queer and trans siblings. Everyone's just walking around continuously traumatizing everyone else because they don't know how to even ask for permission. They don't even know how to live their lives on a consensual basis. And so that was one of the things. And of course, Sarah got, a lot of hate for that and a lot of rape and death threats. And, it's something that we deal with on a consistent basis.
Arizona, from all over
everywhere.
The country.
Everywhere.
Getting feedback from fraternities and sororities on a national level. And it started a whole entire campus-wide discussion. I had to report all the sexual assaults on campus. I'd say at least 80% of them came from fraternity parties.
Of course.
And so it started a whole greater discussion. The FBI was investigating the event.
Because,
all the people who were writing from other states.
It was, and it's indicative of what happens when you challenge the patriarchy, right? What happens, it's at all costs, the patriarchy will demand entitlement to rape. At all costs. Even if they have to expose themselves to do so. And they do, continuously, on a continuous basis. So it happened to Sarah, it happened to me, it's happened to all of us at different levels and different times. And that's why that divine masculinity, that divine femininity, manifesting them, holding each other in a community space, in a safe space, supporting each other, right? Bhakti-Yoga is about building community together, right? So that you all, through your relationship with other, you can strengthen your path, you can strengthen your spiritual practice. And in doing that, we start to decolonize ourselves.
And we always encourage other groups, like Women of Color Speak Out doesn't belong necessarily to Seattle, to our group of people. Like, we want to encourage other people to have movements like ours. And like, I joined this movement because I experienced my own patriarchy and like felt like I had no other options. And then I joined this group, and then it feels good to have a space of people who are checking in with you on your activism, on your spiritual health, on your mental health, on your physical health, and holding you accountable to the things you need for yourself, and how that's going to reflect the youth, how it's going to reflect other, femmes who are like witnessing your work and wanting to do work. And it's good to have that collective of people who can check in on you, not just from a professional level, but from a personal level and all these other levels, because we're layered people, and it's easy for us to show one side because it looks good, and it's really difficult. Like, today, I left my purse at the restaurant because I was so sleep deprived and tired. And it's like, I need to have somebody who can be like, you know what, yoga's can be really great for you. And like,
was it great? Was it great?
Yes. It was really good to reflect and turn my mind off.
Exactly.
Someone else's name. No.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to have people who can check in with you, because we're used to having a capitalistic way of being activists and organizers and healers and nurturers, that we're expected that if we don't take time for self-care, if we don't take time for rebalancing out our own spirits, our own physical well-being, emotional, spiritual, that we're failures, or we're being lazy, or all these other things, when we're not machines.
We're not machines.
We're not machines, and we need to engage with the people we do organizing with, our families, our friends, as though we are human beings.
That's why it's so important to do it together. Because if you're just doing it by yourself, that's the capitalist model, right? The capitalist model is you're supposed to go and join a gym and then go and spend your time and be miserable, being judging others, wearing the right clothes, with the right water bottle, on the right treadmill for the right amount of time, and, all of this stuff, and you're supposed to join the right clubs, and you're supposed to go to the right, yoga studio, and you're supposed to do all of this stuff. And it's the capitalist model of like me, individual, judgment, isolation, loneliness, right? But when we come together with a more decolonized process of, this is about our community, how do we heal together? How do we take care of ourselves together? How do we be healthy together? We had vegan food, right? When I do a decolonizing yoga session, we always have vegan food. Why? Because people are hungry. Not only are they hungry, the timing, it's dinner time. But regardless, it doesn't matter what time of day it is. You want your people to know that their body is safe, that they are nurtured, that they are loved, that their needs are thought about, right? You're not just a machine. We don't just expect you to go, work. This is a space for you to heal. This is a space for you to be comfortable. This is your family. This is a space for us to be honest with each other. Did you get enough sleep? Did you drink enough water? Did you eat enough food? Right? It's okay. You can relax here. You can relax. Don't worry. It's going to be fine. We're going to tell the truth. It might be a bit difficult, but we're going to get through it together. Right? And that's healing. That's, instead of self-care, it's community care. And that's what we always advocate, that if you're just doing self-care by yourself, we question your self-care. Right? We question it. It's not really self-care, because you're in this isolated, lonely thing. Now, it's different if you're an introvert and you're like, oh, but I want to meditate. Okay, that's fine, right? If the practice itself involves being alone, no problem with that whatsoever. But if it is this idea that, oh, I want to be healthy, I want to do this, I want to do that, but you're doing it alone when you could be doing it with others and helping everyone be healthy, that's a much more fulfilling practice. And it's fulfilling on many different ways, on many different levels. Yeah. Anything that you wanted to ask? I know that there were several questions that you had last time we saw each other.
No, I guess they were more on my personal goals, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's fine. Just wanted to check.
Yeah.
You all stayed past time. I really appreciate that. Thank you.